comes to disappointment, it's like, okay, sure, like the feeling is unpleasant, but that doesn't mean that disappointment is bad. Try to really observe the emotion for what it is. Don't identify too much with it, because what you will do is that it will magnify.
Hey everybody, welcome to Alive, where we talk to people who create the most memorable experiences. Today's guest is Robin Jonk. Robin had the picture-perfect life that society had given him. He had successful jobs with companies like Microsoft, Heineken, and was the head of customer experience at Transmed. He's even played rugby for a national team. Clearly, Robin had ticked all the boxes of success, but somewhere deep down, he realized he wasn't happy, and he really couldn't understand why. And so eventually, when his worries turned into terrible migraines, he went on a journey of understanding what happiness truly meant to him. He did what most fear to do. He left his job, traveled across 20 countries, and volunteered with organizations. But keep in mind that it wasn't just about traveling and finding himself. He wanted to find what success meant to him and how he could create an impact on the world. It was a journey of learning, and eventually he learned that the answers were within him. Since he was 18, Robin had been experimenting with habits to create the best version of himself. He realized that he is passionate about improving people's productivity and well-being through habits. And so he founded Chumble, where he dug through the latest research on habits and has the mission to create 1 billion happier lives through habit formation. Robin, welcome to Alive.
Thank you so much. What an introduction to me. Amazing.
Thank you. I'm so excited to have
you. Made me blush.
Oh, Robin, I'm so excited to have you. You're like this breath of fresh air in my life. You're so positive. I just love it. And so today we're going to be talking about habits. And I have a couple of questions lined up. Okay, so I remember when we started working together, we worked on the survey, and you had two separate questions in that survey. And they were, how satisfied are you with your habits? And how satisfied are you with your well-being? And it was interesting to see that people had different answers for both of them. And I just wanted to know your opinion on how habits and well-being are related to each other.
Excellent question. Yes, I feel that there is a very strong correlation between habits and our personal well-being. I think the key discrepancy that we saw in terms of our results were really in terms of our level of awareness. So sometimes we actually feel that our well-being isn't as great as perhaps we would want it to be, but then the habits. Let's try it again.
We got this.
So it all has to do with awareness. So actually, sometimes we are doing some habits in our lives without actually being aware of them. So, for example, when I wake up in the morning, I do a little dance or whatever. It's actually become part of my routine without me actually having to consciously put in an effort to be able to do it. So this is very much also seen as a habit, but actually people don't often consider these small actions as habits. Mm-hmm. So we saw a discrepancy between actually some people that mentioned they were very happy, that their well-being, they rate their well-being very high, but then in terms of their habits, they focus mostly on the bigger habits that they had in their life. So basically, a lot of shoulds in our life. So we should wake up at 5 a.m. to be successful. We should exercise daily. We should meditate, etc., etc. So when we look at these bigger habits, perhaps we are noticing that we're not as successful as we would like. Mm-hmm. However, on a micro level, things have already slipped into our unconscious, like dancing, like hugging, like other small things. Actually, we are far more advanced in terms of our habits than we actually rate our own habits ourselves.
Yeah, and I think before I did the Chumble program, I was like, and we had this conversation about well-being and habits, and I'm like, but Robin, how are they related to each other? Like, I just couldn't understand. And then after I did the program, I was like, oh my God, like I see it, I see it. Because I was coming up with questions, and I was like, ah, that's an interesting question, because it took me a while to really understand. But like you said, like dancing in the morning, like that is something I do every day, and it just raises up my energy levels. I just love it so much.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. And I think we have this like a habit needs to be X, Y, or Z. And I think that's also what you read in all of these books. Like I said, like you need to wake up at 5 a.m. and these kind of things, these like big things. Well, actually, a lot of the smaller habits actually add up to having a huge impact on our day-to-day life.
right. And could you give us, our viewers, a couple of examples of smaller habits besides dancing? Is there anything else that we can think of as a small habit?
Yeah, for sure. So it's actually an example could be taking any that moment that I like to call them, like when you're, for example, waiting for the traffic light, or you're waiting for a friend or something like that. To actually take a few minutes to breathe, to really tune in with yourself, to pay attention to what is happening. Another one could be actually to in the morning think about the people that you're grateful for, the things in life that you're grateful for. These things, they can literally take less than a minute,
Yeah.
but the impact that it has on your day to day is huge. Is so big.
Yeah. And I want to add that they can be like, so for me, like when you say be grateful in the morning, right? So initially, like what you read online is like, okay, journal like 3 things that you love to do, which is obviously if that works for you, works for you. For me, I can't do that. But I love what you told me in one session on one of our 101s, where like you can make it fun too. Like you can draw on your mirror like tiny little doodles, tiny little cartoons. And I think that's just so fun to do. And it doesn't need to be just like what you read. It can just be what works for you.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
yeah. And so the question that I'm sure everyone has is, why is it so hard to make habits stick?
yeah. Excellent question. So, in essence, like a habit is just a way for our brain to take a shortcut. So when we actually repeat behavior often enough, our brain actually creates a shortcut to save energy, so that we don't need to consciously make that decision over and over again.
Mhm.
So actually, it's imprinted in our brain. And to be able to break that, you need, according to science, actually 66 days of actually breaking that habit, or of creating a new habit inside of your brain. So in those 66 days, that's a little over 2 months.
Mhm.
We need to consistently be doing a new habit. Like imagine, for example, like if we think about snacking on the couch or whatever, how often in our lifetime have we been doing that? It's already so much. So like that connection, that shortcut, has become so strong that you really need to consistently break that, like replace that with new behavior, to
Mhm.
be able to to really have this new habit, to really be able to succeed at this more supportive habit of you that you want to create essentially.
Yeah. And so, what are some common mistakes that people make when introducing a new habit?
Yeah, excellent question. So there's there's 3 big pitfalls that people face the most. Firstly, clarity. So people who um, focus on doing something simply because like they read it in a book, or someone told them to, or whatever. So that's clarity on motivation and the goals exactly that I want to be achieving is not really there. So clarity on your goals and your motivation. Secondly, failure being seen as failure. as weird as it sounds, actually, you can actually fail your way to success. So whenever I fail, I try to see it as being one failure closer to success, and actually looking at something that happened to me. Like, okay, so what did I learn from this? What would I want to do differently in the future? So really having that mindset, creating that growth mindset for yourself is something that a lot of people don't do. And then thirdly is actually our support system. So when I want to eat healthier and I have a jar of cookies on my table, it can look nice and it can be like this cozy environment. But then in reality, having that in your sight is gonna create this craving of wanting to eat those cookies.
Right.
So, and then it's really about how do I prepare myself for success, rather than relying so heavily on self-discipline, on our willpower, because obviously that is not an infinite source. Really having so not having clarity, having a fixed mindset, and not having the right support structures, both physically as well as socially.
Yeah. And with the clarity aspect, would you say that intrinsic and extrinsic motivation sort of comes in that, where you have clarity on like what's actually motivating you? And for our viewers who don't know the difference, could you kind of go a little bit into what each one is?
Yeah, of course. No, of course. So in terms of clarity on your motivation, it's exactly as you said. So very often we are actually not consciously thinking about what it is that actually motivates us to do something. So for example, if I'm exercising to have a killer summer body versus exercising simply because I enjoy the process of exercising and the way that it makes me feel, in terms of effectiveness in the long run when it comes to our habits, it's a huge difference. And this is exactly what the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation is like. So intrinsic motivation is all about doing something simply for the purpose of enjoying it, enjoying the way that the activity makes you feel, enjoying the activity itself, so that we're actually way more likely to sustain that habit in the long run. On the other end, we have extrinsic motivation, and this is very much the traditional the carrot and the stick. So if I want to have a killer summer body, okay, fine. This will motivate me to a certain extent. But then as I've shown off this beautiful body during summer, obviously there's gonna come a point where actually I'm gonna do amazingly, and then I'm gonna have a huge dip. So in the long run, it actually doesn't help me at all to focus so heavily on these aspects. So in terms of that motivational aspect, what science has really shown is that make sure that your primary motivation is really comes from that intrinsic motivation. So doing something that you truly enjoy or enjoy how it makes you feel. You can complement it in the short run with some external motivation. So for example, if you want to train for a triathlon, if you want to have certain goals when it comes to your health, your business, reading books, whatever, make sure that it's only complementing that primary intrinsic motivation and doesn't become a dominant force. Because some research from Daniel Pink, who focuses a lot on this motivation, has a book about it. It's called Drive. We highly recommend it. Actually speaks about extrinsic motivation actually having the ability to decrease our intrinsic motivation. So as sometimes we supplement our intrinsic motivation with extrinsic motivation, sometimes it can actually cause the overall motivation to drop because it makes the intrinsic motivation shrink so much. If that's still clear.
Yeah, no, it is. And do you think Like, have you noticed if it's hard for people to identify if they're actually intrinsically or extrinsically motivated?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. And I think this is really a process of trial and error. Like trying to think about small things, like before and after a certain activity, whether you're dreading it, whether you're feeling really great afterwards, and these small cues, try to, over a period of time, really pick up on these things so that overall you come to a fun evaluation, so to say. If for 6 out of 7 days you were actually dreading the activity, then perhaps you're more extrinsically motivated than you are intrinsically. Right. Whereas if you felt really great and you were really looking forward to it, then of course you're going to be more towards that intrinsic motivation.
Yeah. And are there any techniques that people can use to make it easier to incorporate new habits? Like, I remember very specifically in the Chumble program, habit stacking. That one's my favorite technique. But could you go over like a couple of techniques that people can either read about or learn more about?
Yeah, of course. So habit stacking is a great example. It's a very simple technique of simply adding a new habit and linking it to an already existing habit. An example could be if I want to introduce flossing to my routine, and if I do it right before or right after I brush my teeth, it's automatically linked to this habit, this shortcut that has already been created in my brain. And therefore, without thinking about it too much, I go into autopilot of doing actually both habits at once. So therefore, I don't really consume any additional energy in doing this additional habit. And therefore, the success rate is significantly higher.
Yeah.
Some other tricks are to really chunk your goals down into bite-sized steps.
Chumble.
So a technique that we developed with Chumble is actually called chumbling. So to chumble means to take smaller bites.
Right.
And what you basically do is that you take this bigger goal. Let's say I want to read for 2 hours each week. To actually chunk it down into, okay, so in terms of the frequency of how much I read, so let's say those 2 hours per week is going to be 4 times for half an hour. Then actually first what we're going to do is that we're going to chunk down that half an hour in half. So we're going to do it for 15 minutes for 4 days. And then we chunk it down again, but then in terms of the frequency. So we go from 4 days, 15 minutes, to actually starting with 2 days and 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And then every 2 weeks, we unfold again. So we go from 2 days, 15 minutes, to 4 days, 15 minutes, to 4 days, 30 minutes. And that way, you really allow yourself to build up a natural frequency and a natural habit that actually sticks, rather than going in super high and then failing and then being demotivated and that actually harming the momentum that you have on your time.
Yeah, and I think along with chumbling, you're very you also motivate us to experiment a lot. Understanding what works for us, what doesn't work for us. And could you kind of explain why you think experimenting is so important? Because I feel like that's something that a lot of people do not realize, because a lot of the things we read online, like, oh, you should be reading an hour every day. And then you start feeling like, okay, that's what I'm supposed to be doing, right? Instead of like, okay, what works for me? What doesn't work for me? It's a process of understanding self. So can you kind of hit upon that as well, or touch upon that?
Yeah. No, of course. So I really believe in experiential learning and that process of experimentation in our personal and professional growth. To me, it's and according to research as well, like it all has to do with our level of awareness. So when, for example, we just copy paste something from a book that we've read, or an article, or a podcast that we listen to, or whatever, just because it works for someone else doesn't mean that it works in the same way for us. And I think trying different things out, and as I said, like actually when we fail, we're one failure closer to success, because what did we learn from this failure? So, for example, in the example of reading, okay, so I noticed that on Fridays I find it very hard to read. Okay, so maybe on the weekends I'm in a different mood. Maybe on the weekend I really want to have some downtime, don't feel like scientific reading or whatever. And then in that process, I actually learn how to better schedule my time, my habits. Perhaps you're going to discover that some habits that you were super excited about at first, you actually don't really like that much. And maybe you're going to discover that some things that initially you didn't feel you had a very strong connection to, you actually end up loving, and it actually ends up changing your life in a huge way.
Right.
So that is why experimenting and trying different things out for yourself, and also allowing yourself to experiment and fail again and learn and fail again, and that whole cycle, it's not only important in the program that we do, but also it's really that lifelong learner that I believe in.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that made it at least easy for me to like be okay with this experimenting part, or like trying and failing was definitely you being there as a motivation. But in the program, we have other people who are also doing it with you. And so it's just like, oh, you know, like I'm not alone in this. Everyone else is also failing. So it's okay. We'll figure it out. And I think that was really interesting as well.
Yeah, it's very interesting, because when we fail, we tend to jump to, oh wow, like I suck, like this must never happen to someone else, when in reality it happens to every one of us. So actually, by isolating yourself, and that's also the thing with like self-help books and getting knowledge from books, like you're reading it yourself, but then when you experiment with different things and you're isolated in that bubble, that process of learning is actually much harder, and it's much more demotivating when you actually fail. So as you said, like speaking to other people who also fail, but also succeed, and where you can actually have that mix of, okay, so what has gone well for you, what has not gone so well for you, actually allows you to connect with others in a very open environment that really fosters much quicker learning and much more fun and open learning as well. Because like you're not alone in that. You're sharing this journey with others who are on the same path.
Yeah. And it's interesting because ever since I've done the program, I know that like say that I fall back onto like an old habit, I don't have as much stress as I used to at one point. I don't feel bad. I mean, I do feel bad about it. I'm just like, I know I can get back up again. And I think that's really interesting. And I think I've learned so much from your program. But so for people who do fall back into old habits and they're very frustrated with themselves, like what advice do you have for them?
Yeah, excellent question. I think three things. So firstly, a proactive measure is really to look into that clarity aspect that we spoke about. So what often happens is that we don't really set out clear goals of things that we want to achieve, which actually makes it very easy for us to feel like we failed. Because when I say I want to eat healthier, then okay, like did I fail when I eat a cookie, or did I fail if I had 3 or 4 cheat meals? You know, like there's quite a variance there.
Yeah.
So what exactly does success look like to you? And really make sure to use that chumbling method to really take it bite by bite. In the moment, you're going to feel disappointed. But I think we kind of thought of that we should mark certain emotions as good and certain emotions as bad, when in reality, all emotions actually add a certain value to our life. So by marking it as good or bad, we're actually triggering it to have a positive or a negative impact on our lives. And when it comes to disappointment, it's like, okay, sure, like the feeling is unpleasant, but that doesn't mean that disappointment is bad. Try to really observe the emotion for what it is. Okay, it's like, this is how I'm feeling right now. The feeling can be there, accept it for what it is, but then don't identify too much with it, because what you will do is that it will magnify. It will have an even greater impact.
Right.
So really try to be present with the emotion. And if it helps, you can focus on your breath. You can meditate in any form of state that you want. And then as a third step, take small actions. What is the next tiny step that you could take to make you feel successful again, to get the momentum on your side again? So let's say if I wanted to eat healthier, let's stick with that one. I just had, as an example, I didn't just have it, unfortunately, a big tub of vegan ice cream.
Yeah.
I can either feel super bad about myself and have cheat meals for the rest of the week.
Yeah.
Or I can simply recognize that I'm feeling this way. Okay. So what is the next tiny step that I could take that makes me feel better about this goal? That makes me feel better about this habit? Well, perhaps I could have an apple, or perhaps I could I could plan some healthy meals for the upcoming week, so that I'm making it easier for myself to succeed. So for the three, firstly, plan, be very clear on what it is that you want to achieve and make it realistic, small steps. Secondly, be present in the emotion, in the disappointment, anger, sadness, whatever it is. Try not to identify with it. So observe it for what it is. And then thirdly, what is the first tiny step that you can take to go from feeling disappointed to actually getting that momentum on your side again?
Yeah, and I love that. I think, guys, he's giving you step-by-step things to do. Please take notes. Yeah, take notes. And so what is the experience you want people to take away from Chumble?
This is a very good question, Shubhi. I want people to feel confident about taking control of their lives, taking control of their day-to-day. And I want them to feel like they can design their lives to be anything that they want it to be. I want people to be productive. I want people to have great well-being. I want people to take care of themselves. And I want people to feel aligned with the future them that they are trying to create. I want them to feel that they are taking consistent steps in creating the future version of themselves that they want to be creating in the future.
Right. I love that, Robin. And I think you've probably definitely, or at least I've seen, that people who do take the program, there is a huge transition in them. At least there was in me, for sure.
Okay.
And so where can people find you if they want to reach out to you?
Yeah, of course. So on Instagram, it's at chumble.family. That is CHUMBLE.family. We're on LinkedIn as well. My name is Robin Jonk. That is ROBIN JONK. Will be lovely to connect. And yeah, if we always put content out there, so feel free to connect with us.
Yes, and I want to thank you so much, Robin, for being here. And thank you to all our viewers for watching. We hope that you learned something from this. All right, bye, guys. See you next time.
Thank you so much for having me, Julie.
Of course. Bye.